I have always wondered how authentication really works and how I can build authentication myself. It was never a problem to somehow build a website using some website builder or to build some backend script that automatically performs some work. But how does authentication online work? I never got it. And in this video, I want to build a very, very simple authentication system, for example, for an online website. And we're going to use Python Flask today. Yesterday, I've already recorded a video together with you where we explored how to use the endpoints a bit, but you don't need to know all of that. We're going to build a very simple authentication system from scratch, and here's my plan. My plan is the following. Authentication system plan. First of all, what do we need? We need a login endpoint, obviously. And if you log into any website, then obviously you need to provide your username. Depending on the website, it could also be the email. Let's just go for the username. Because I really like websites where you just have to specify username and password, and that's already enough to register. Let's go for that simple route. We just have a username and we have a password. Those can be provided, and it's going to be a post request. So we're posting username and password to the server, and then the server responds with, this is the request, and then the server response is, what is the server response? Is somehow okay. No, that does not work, because if the server just says okay, then the login was performed successfully, but then the web browser still does not keep any information on the user being logged in, and also the server doesn't keep the user logged in somehow. So that's what I think the tokens are for. So here we return a token. And the server returns a token that can be some generated string like this. And this token keeps user authenticated. Something like that. Okay, we have a username, a password, and when the user is successfully logged in, the server responds with a token. And I think that's the first step. We don't yet have a register endpoint. We're going to do that afterwards, but let's just try to do that. Okay, this is our plan. Let's try to do that. I will open the API file from yesterday, but I will delete most of what we have here. Maybe I will keep the hello world and change the return text to hello world. Remove the variables, then I will remove all of that. Yes, I will remove all of that. And let's create a new method in Flask, in Python Flask, that is the login endpoint. Then we are renaming this method login, and then let's just say logged in. We're not doing any credential checking here. And then let's try to run the Flask app. How did that work? Flask --app, I think. API py run. Okay, now my endpoint is running. And let's open Firefox. Let me just hide the taskbar. Yes, okay. So this right here is Firefox. And we can now access the server. This is the hello world that we generated here. Oops. Come on. And if we access the login endpoint, it says logged in. Of course, I haven't specified a username. Now, how do I do that? To specify the username, we could either pass the username as a URL parameter, as a path parameter, something like this. But this is a bad practice. I have never seen this done anywhere, or I think like this, user Daniel and and password, and then let's put the clear text password here. Of course, I have also never seen that. I think maybe I have seen that somewhere. Not sure. But you don't specify username and password via the URL normally. So how it's usually done is this is done via a request. To perform requests, and I mean a GET or a POST or a PUT request, so on the HTTP request level. In the browser window, all we do see is GET requests and their responses. So to perform the other requests, we have to get a plugin. Oh, sorry. Oh my God. Okay, so extensions. I have to get an extension to perform requests. REST request. Let's just look for REST requests. There's an HTTP request maker. Oh, we could also send requests via the inspection tool. So then we don't rely on requests on an extension. That would of course also be nice, because we can here open the network tab, and then we can create a request here, new request. Maybe we're going to do that. The only downside here is that I'm not sure if we can save the request. Can we save requests here? I'm not sure. No, let me just grab some plugin. Best REST request extension Firefox. Rester. Oh, Rested. I've used Rested before, I think. So let's add that to Firefox. Rested was added. There it is. And yep, this is now a tool that can send REST requests. So this is very, very good. It's extremely useful for testing APIs. So let's just perform this identical request, this login request, in the RESted interface. So I'm going to pass the URL and send the request. And I get a response with a 200 response code, OK. And the response contains logged in. So that is just the string that we return. Now let's create an ultra stupid login here. And let's do the following. We first have to somehow accept a parameter. Because right here we want to send not a GET request, because we don't really get something when we log in. Oh, wait. Okay, no. One could argue that we are getting the authentication token when logging in. So actually a GET request would be okay. But we could also say POST, because we're posting username and password to the server. I think GET and POST should both be okay. Now, here in the request body, we can specify JSON, and then we can specify I want to send a username, user, Daniel, and then I want to send a password, and I'm just going to send clear text. I'm going to send the password as clear text. I think that is usually also done, at least when first logging in. We send passwords as clear text. So super secret, exclamation mark. Then we send this request. And I can see in the server logs right here that a post login was received, but the response code is 405. And that is, I think, because let's have a look at the software method not allowed. That means, yeah, method not allowed means that the method was not specified here, because this, I think, is a GET request. So far we have only created the GET request. So let's check out how to create a post request in Flask. Ideally in the official page right here. HTTP method sounds good. Oh, and there, great, awesome. There's already a login method as an example here. So there's the login. We can specify together with the app route annotation the methods. This methods object that specifies the methods that are accepted. So now the method post is also accepted. So let's just try to send the very same request and see what happens. And now the response code is okay. So that means now the login is accepted, but we don't yet perform any logic here. We are just accepting whatever is fed into the application. So what do we do? I would say we have to, when we post data to the server, of course, at the server side, retrieve the data. So I'm sending username and password to the server. How do I retrieve the username and password now from the Flask app? How do I do that? And I'm really wondering, because here in the example code, the fields are not being retrieved. Maybe this is just dummy code. So let's just look up Python Flask parameters. And then we should find something somewhere here. And I'm not sure if I'm naming everything correctly, because I'm referring to those two parameters as parameters, but I think we have to distinguish between the URL parameters and the request body's content. Maybe I have to retrieve the request body JSON. Python Flask get request body. Let's see. Let's look for request body here. There's an occurrence of request body in this text in the documentation. I am not sure what it refers to. Test request contexts. I'm really not familiar with all of that stuff. What happens if we look just for body? Okay, let me just look that up again. Flask get. Let's just say get parameters from request. I hope this does not refer to the URL parameters, but I think it does. Oh, okay, this sounds promising. There is this variable request.args, which might contain the request arguments. Request. What is request? Import the Flask module, but this has to be imported. So this I am not sure about that. In Python Flask, the request module is an object that allows you to access the data sent from the user to the server, which is exactly what we need. And that data is passed into your Flask application. Okay, why does it need to be a separate module? That is something I don't get, because I would expect everybody who provides some kind of interface or web API to somehow work with requests. So why is this an additional module in Python? I don't know. I will just accept this for now, I would say. So let's go to the topmost line in the code and say we also import request from Flask. And then here, let's just do a print request. And maybe we can get the server to print our request contents. Let's see. Let's go back to the rested client and send that same request now. The response was accepted, and let's go to the server logs, and there is nothing. There's nothing there. Maybe my print statement is wrong. I'm not an expert at Python, so if you see something that is super wrong, then please don't be angry with me. I'm just experimenting with all the languages on this channel, and it's part of the fun of those videos, I think. Okay, here I see that the request parameters are passed via the query, which is definitely not what I want. So maybe this is wrong. Maybe this is wrong. Let me just undo that request module import. That might answer why it is a separate module to be imported. Because, yeah, you might not always need the query parameters. How do you get posted JSON in Flask? That is the question I want to have answered. Oh, but here they also import request. Okay, let's try with the request. I don't know why it doesn't work, honestly, because I'm just importing the request and then printing it. So I would expect it to work. So let's log in. User, password, logged in. Maybe things are not just printed out in if they run in a Flask server. Let me just try to print test print out here. So let's try again. Let's send that same request and send the request, and there's our test printout. So apparently, oh, okay, I see, I was mistaken. Our test printout is printed here, but the request is also printed. So in fact, both of the printouts work. That means that we can, let's try to print the request argument. I think it was done like that, but let me just look it up. Request args, and then this is a dictionary, and we access the key. Let's just print all the arguments. Send the request. Okay, and we don't get much insight because it just says it's an immutable multi-dictionary. That means we have to specify user here. Let's just see if that prints. It does not, the server didn't update, so let me see if it prints now. I'm not sure. Has it printed anything? I don't see what was printed, honestly. User. I'm posting the user here. So I would expect it to be printed. Let me just print trying to log in here, just so that I can find the actual printout more easily. Let's restart the Flask app and let's send the request. There was a bad request here. Why is this a bad request? That's interesting. Why is it a bad request? It's the very same request that we sent before. The browser sent a request that the server could not understand. Why? The trying to log in is printed here. And then we're just attempting to print the request args here. Maybe something else is wrong, or well, something must be wrong, honestly. I see that the request arguments are fetched using two different methods. The first one is to use an explicit getter method. The other one is to access the arguments dictionary directly. I don't think there should be a difference between those two. But let's try to use the get here in our case as well. So request args get user. Let's see, let's try to rerun the Flask app. It does not work because I have forgotten the closing bracket. Now the application is running. And let's try again. And now that query is okay. I have no idea why, honestly. Maybe I had a typo somewhere, or that type of fetching the data is maybe deprecated, I don't know. And it was removed from the requests object or module. Okay, but now, this is also interesting. The server logs say trying to log in, and then I'm printing the username and it says none. Why is it none? I'm actually providing the username. I'm providing it here, if I'm not completely mistaken. And I'm sending a post request. This is weird. Why does this not work? I hope maybe I have specified these URL parameters. Let me just try user equals Daniel and let's send that request. This apparently also doesn't work. It still says none in the server logs. Honestly, I don't get it. Request arguments get user. And I'm specifying user here. I will have a solution in a couple of seconds, but I don't know what it is right now. If request is JSON, we can also check if the request is JSON. That is interesting. But we're sending JSON, yes, that is fine. Maybe it works if we send a different format. Let's send multi-part form data. That doesn't work. And let's send URL encoded form data. That doesn't do anything either. Oh, oh my God. I just noted I was in Tmux scrolling mode. That means that's the mode when you scroll up the logs right here. And oh my God, I'm so stupid. It actually worked, but I was scrolled up and the scrolling down was inactivated because I was in the scrolling mode and not printing the latest logs. And actually here we can see that the login worked once and we actually got the request data, and that is the request where I specified my name via the query parameters, which is not what I want. I don't want to specify it via the query parameters. So what is wrong? Query parameters seem to work. Okay, that is fine. That's already something valuable to know, but I want to use the request parameters. I mean the request body. Python Flask request body JSON. That's probably the simplest problem to solve, but somehow, and this is not a joke, when I'm recording those videos here, my brain is running at like 50% capacity at most. I do the stupidest errors all the time because normally I'm a quiet worker and I can best provide code when I'm in complete silence, and it's really hard moderating stuff and also doing reasonable and rational stuff at the same time. But I love recording and interacting with you in the comments, and it's just an awesome experience on this YouTube channel, and that's why I'm doing it. So, oh, okay, there's a getJSON method. We should have had a look at that before. Okay. getJSON method parses data as JSON. If the MIME type does not indicate JSON, it does because we're specifying it via the rested plugin, which we use to send requests. Then I lost it. No, there it is. On JSON loading failed is called, and return value is used as the return value. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, short answer, we can try to use getJSON. Parses data as JSON. Maybe we have to also not access the args object, but some data object or something like that. But let's just try getJSON first and see what happens. Okay, that didn't work. The request is still getting none here. I mean, the server is still getting none as requested username. So let's see the data object. Where does that come from? getJSON. Request.json. Is there a request.json object? And we can just call get. Let's just try that stupidly naively. No. That doesn't seem to work. But also at the same time now, I'm not sure if I even restarted the server in the test before properly. So let's retry that same request again. Okay, the multi-dictionary object has no attribute getJSON. It means that the method has to be called somewhere else. Request.getJSON. Oh, can we? Of course, we call the getJSON on the request directly and not on the arguments object. So let's try again. Bad request. Why? Oh, we have to provide JSON, of course. Aha, and that's awesome now. And now we can read trying to log in here in the server logs, and we get the user and the password in clear text. Now I don't get why it's getting the entire JSON. Maybe I can't specify a field here, and we always get the entire request body, which seems to be the case. And then if that is JSON, then what is the return type here? It's any. Yeah, great. But then how do I get a specific field from that? So in summary, it's already awesome progress here, because now we can provide the user and the password to the login method. But how do we now work with those? So username is equal to request.get, I don't know, user, maybe? Maybe you can do something like that. I don't get how Python is supposed to work if everything returns as any. So what do I do with the return type? What do? I don't get it. I mean, there's some JSON thing right here that's printed, but how do I work with it if it's any? Special type indicating an unconstrained type. Any is compatible with any type. Yeah, awesome. So what do I do with it? Python Flask JSON request get. Let's see what people write online. Okay, there's apparently a get method on the JSON. By the way, please write in the comments how I can find out which methods are available on an object. For example, here there's this getJSON method, which returns the request JSON. But then how do I know what this object can do and which method it provides? I have no idea. This would be very valuable to know for me. and ideally without an IDE, because I like it to program in this environment. But is there some documentation anywhere? Because get.json is documented to return any. So how do I know what to do with it afterwards? I don't really get that. Then request json.get user, and that returns the username. And then let's print received username, and then we received the username right here. And let's see if that works. Let's restart the server, and I would expect the username now to be printed explicitly in the server logs. There's a syntax error, of course. Missing parentheses in call to print. Do I have to specify parentheses here? I am never sure what to do in Python, because sometimes there's a print statement with parentheses and sometimes there's one without. But let's just try. I think that's the difference between Python 2.x and 3.x. Okay, received username Daniel. Awesome. So now I have the variable, and I think this is now already 80% of the challenge in this video. Now the rest is easy, because now we can get the password and password here. Received username. Let's just print that also, and password like that. Oops. And password. Why was it that printed like 7 times? No idea. That's what happens when you mistype something in Vim. Okay, server's running. Let's log in. Received username Daniel and super secret. Okay, that's the password. Now log in. Now we need a method that checks if the login is valid. And so let's do that. Let's check login and provide as variables username and password. And then we do the following. Let's just do very stupid, simple in-app logic, okay? So if username equals Daniel, and is it and like that? Yes, I think it is. And password equals super secret exclamation mark, then return true. Do we return true? No, we don't. There's no such thing as true in Python. What do we do? What do we return here? I mean, we can return some success indicator, but I don't know what's the best practice here. Here's a method, do the login, show the login form. No, we don't. We do return an API key, or no, not an API key, but an authentication token. Let's say it's just that. This is the secret authentication token that cannot be hacked. Okay, and else, and else we return negative. I don't find it very nice that we either return an authentication token, and else we still we return some kind of rejection, but it's the same type. It's both a string. We can't really distinguish based on the type whether the login was successful or not. This feels really dirty. Dirty. Let's try to do that here. let's return the check login results here and see. And maybe before we return the authentication token, let's also print login successful for username. And here we can print login failed for user. Let's restart the server and see what happens. And of course the syntax is wrong because my triple equal signs were borrowed from JavaScript probably, and that's why it didn't work. Else. The else needs a colon at the end of that, at the end of the statement. Maybe now it works. Let's see. It's really problematic if you're doing multiple programming languages at once. Okay, we have logged in with the username and the password, and we have received an authentication token as a response. And the server logs say login successful for username, but that is of course wrongly formatted, obviously, because I have missed the formatting specifier in front of the printed statement. So let's retry, and now it should really work. And there we go, login successful for user Daniel. Let's try to specify a different password, just like that, and send that. And the response is login failed for user Daniel, which is awesome. We have a very, very stupid, simple authentication system. Now, the response here is negative, which I don't like. I don't like that. I want to send a failure somehow. We have to look up how to send response code in Flask. Python Flask response. I think currently whenever you return some string, it's assumed a successful response. And then let's look up HTTP failed login response or status code. What is the best status code for that? 401 unauthorized could be it. Yeah. So we have to return the unauthorized one. We can probably return the flask.response object. Yeah, the response object that is used by default in Flask works like the response object from Werkzeug, but is set to have an HTML MIME type by default, blah, 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 blah. Set data, we can set data here, we can set, well, status. That is it. Okay, let's look up how to return a response. So. What does pass mean? No idea. But I can't know everything. Return response code. We can just return an empty string and then a comma and then the response code? What kind of wizardry is that? No. Okay, let's try that. If that works, that would be really nice. So, first of all, if the login is successful, we respond with this dummy what is it called? with this dummy access token. If it is not successful, we return login failed, and we return with 401, and that should be the error code. So let's see if that works. If that works, that would be really interesting. And we got the 401 unauthorized error code. Awesome. So we now do have this login interface. There's the user, Daniel, password super secret, but it had the wrong last character. Now let's try with the exclamation mark at the end, which is the correct password. Let's send that request, and we are authorized. Now this is just a dummy access token. Should we already generate a proper one? No, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it makes more sense to check the username and the password from some kind of stupid simple database. Let's create a stupid simple database that persists the users that we have created. So let's do a simple JSON text file. Python JSON text file. Python JSON. Then so I have really not that much idea about what I'm doing. Wait, what is markup save escape? I will just delete that. That is from yesterday's video where I escaped the input to the app. Let's replace that with import JSON, because that's what we need now. So what I want to do, let me just open our plan that we created at the beginning. What do we need? We need a login with a post, HTTP method, username and password, response with a token. Okay, we have a dummy token right now, but we want to persist the users in a database. That is, and effectively, if you hear the word database, forget about all the technology bullshit. Forget about it. Forget about Postgres. Forget about MySQL. Forget about MariaDB and all of that stuff. For me, or in this video, a database, and this is, by the way, how it was done in the past, is a very simple text file. So create a JSON file that stores users that are registered. Something like this. Username or user Daniel. No. User Daniel. Password super secret. Now I know this is ultra insecure because we're storing the password in clear text, but we have to start somewhere. Before we continue with the hashing and all of that stuff, let's just do that and keep it very simple. So we check the login. Let's try to do the following. When checking the login, we have to somehow read a file. That file doesn't exist yet, so let's create it and let's call it users.json. That's our new file. And the first user is obviously me, Daniel. Then my password is super secret, exclamation mark. And then we close that file. And that doesn't work because now we have two objects here, two that resemble a single, no, sorry. To resemble a single user, we have to create an object out of this by putting this in further braces or parentheses. Oh God. Just like that. Oh, what's that? And this is the user. No, but what is the key to that user object? I think it should not be this. What's wrong here? I don't get it. What's the key to this user object? Maybe the user... No, let's identify the user with the user's name directly. Daniel. Or alternatively, the user has some kind of ID. User ID that is automatically generated somehow. No, but I think the key being the username is fine, and the user has properties such as the password. And let's now, just to make it a bit more interesting, something like, what else does the user have? Technically, you could have a creation date or creation time. The user was created in 2031. December 1st, exactly at midnight, something like that. And then the user would have or could have a status. For example, it's a premium user, something like that. And of course, I have to append the commas at the end of those lines here. So that's the first user. So let's create another user just to make it a bit more interesting. An app with just one user is completely boring. And the next user, and here let me just do the following. I will go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/HirschDaniel, and I will pick one of you guys. So let's go to my latest video. And let's go down to the comments. Why does my YouTube look so weird? Ah, okay, so it's because I was zoomed in. William Nduka. William Nduka. Like this. So if you're watching this, greetings go out to you. And let's also pick Aryan Parashar. Aryan Parashar. And let's then also pick Yin Kao. So greetings go out to you guys. You are the guys that commented on my last video. So awesome to have you on board. William Nduka, your password is I like the weather today. Then Aryan's password is super nice. And Yin Kao's password is 我是中国人. Probably Chinese. I am Chinese. So okay, now we have a couple of users. All are premium status users. Let's just degrade myself here a bit. Super medium user. Okay, now this is our user database. It's not sophisticated, it's not some fancy technology, but I think it might be able to work. So let's go back to the login checker and somehow find out how to, in Python, work with those JSON objects. So first of all, we need to read the JSON file somehow. I can see here that there's a dumps method which converts a Python object to JSON. Of course, that doesn't do it. We need to load JSON. So let's try that. Check login, and when checking login, what we do is we load the JSON, and we load users.json here. Let's call that object userdb, and then we create a user exists method. User exists, and then we provide the username and the password. And in that method, we're checking if the user exists. So, by the way, I just remembered, Python does not contain or does not support Boolean values such as lowercase true and false, but it has uppercase true and false. Yes, that was it. Okay, so let's check user exists, username, password, and then inside that method what we do is let's load the JSON file in there, and let's just print out the userdb, just so I can see that it is really successfully loading. Then we call create the request right here, and something is wrong, syntactically wrong. Expecting value line 1, blah blah blah. JSON decoder does not work apparently. Why does it not work? Is my JSON wrong? Let's confirm that the JSON is correctly defined. JSON checker. Validate JSON. JSON is valid. Okay. Then what is wrong? What is wrong? What is wrong? Line 28 in user exists. I have no idea what is wrong. Okay, I think I got it. We're trying to load an actual JSON string here, but I'm trying to load the file. I provided the file name. Of course, that doesn't work. We have to read the file first. And I'm not sure if this JSON library provides the capabilities to read in a file. Python read file content. Let's just try that piece of code. It seems to read the file as file. Let's just, file name file name, and then this is the JSON string, and we are reading users.json, and then the JSON loads function gets as input the JSON string, and then we print the user DB. Let's see. I'm sending a request now and get an unauthorized. That is probably because my logic is now flawed, but the JSON object is correctly read into the memory, which is very nice. And we're printing the entire user DB, which is great. So we can now read the user JSON into memory, and now we have to access the users. And probably we can do something like that and then just say, and then access the username key. Let's see if that works, if we print it out. So now I would expect if we log in as Daniel, only the Daniel user is printed here. Yes. As you can see, I'm trying to log in here, and then the Daniel username or user object is printed out, which is very nice. And now we can do the following. If the user before we do anything, let's see what happens if we specify a user that does not exist. Daniel2. And here, and here we get a key error, that key doesn't exist. Okay, that is useful. So let's check. Maybe we should use some try catch statement here. Python try catch. We try to access the JSON. We try to get the user object or user properties, and those are accessible at the user DB at username. All right. And if an exception happens, except, then we print user doesn't exist or does not exist. And let's also specify the username here just for the sake of completeness. So here we are getting all the user properties from our mocked, or not mocked, but from our JSON database, which is very simple. But I mean, it will be good enough for up to whatever, 50 to 100 users. So if you're prototyping something or doing something very, very simple, there's no need to do something difficult or something that will require you to familiarize with complex database systems and deploy heavy load software. So if the user exists, we are trying to get the user properties. If there's an exception, we return login failed. We don't say for security reasons that the user does not exist, because that would allow the attacker to guess users. Because they could also have let's just say user does not exist, just to make our Application as developer friendly as possible. Login failed. User does not exist. 401. Then we are trying to get the user properties, which we have hopefully succeeded here. And what do we do with the user properties? We check if the password is correct. If user properties password is equal to, do we use, I'm never sure, 3 equal signs or 2. Python 3 equal or 2. Python equals strings. Okay, 2 equal signs. If user properties password is equal to the provided password, then if the user properties password is equal to the provided password, then the login succeeded. Return login succeeded. Status code 200, which is success. Maybe we should set an authentication token. Whatever. It doesn't really matter. Okay. And else we return the login failed. But this time not user does not exist, but password or wrong password 401. Let's see what that does. That should be a half capable login, except only the access tokens are, of course, just mocked. So we have this post request. We have a login function that is running in Flask in the background. So we are sending user Daniel 2, which does not exist. Let's just make it Richard because we haven't set a Richard here. And we are sending a request now. And it says login successful for user Richard. What the hell? We don't even have a user Richard in the database. How does this work? What? I thought this video was done now. Oh no. I can't just specify some user and have the login succeed. That's crazy. If the user exists, login successful. Why? But we don't have a Richard in the user database, or am I stupid? There's no Richard? Good God. What the hell? It even says user Richard does not exist. Login successful for user Richard. User Richard does not exist. So it does reach this print statement down here. But what the hell? And then we are returning the 401 error code. Right there. So okay, we are returning the error code in the user exists method, but of course that doesn't work. Because if we return an object, then that is a truthy value, That is a truthy value, and that truthy value will return or will be interpreted as true in this user exists clause. Yeah, so let's just return a simple true or false. User exists. What the hell am I even doing here? User exists is checking even if the password is correct. If user exists. Oh my god, what am I doing? Okay, I have to refactor this a bit. Let's do in check login. Let's read the database here. And we are providing the user DB in the user exists method. User DB. Then this code is checking if the user exists. Whoops. If the user doesn't exist, then return false, obviously. What the hell? If the user... okay. If this piece of code, if the user exists, we return true. Else the user does not exist. Return false. Then in the check login method, we are opening the file, we are opening the user database. We are checking if the user exists. We don't need the password in this method. That means we can also remove it here. User exists, okay. Then we have to check if the user's password is correct. So let's do the following. We can now access the user. Let's not return true if the user exists, but actually return the user properties. Yeah, let's just do that. So if the user exists, no, that means we would have to store that somehow. I mean, we would have to store the return value here somehow, which is ugly. So if the user exists, that means I can create user properties here as well, user DB, username, and then I'm checking if the password is correct. If user properties password equals the user and the supplied password, then the login is successful. Else the login fails. Else, let's just return the login failed. Wrong password. Okay, now it should work. Let's just pray that this works. Login failed for user Richard. Okay. Why? Because the user does not exist. User does not exist. Let's try again. And now we have this message here. Login failed for user Richard. User does not exist. Perfect. Now let's try user Daniel, who exists in the user database. Let's send a request. Now the error message is trying to log in. And okay, the user seems to exist, but we don't get any further issue here. That's because we straight up return the return code, so we can't rely on the server logs, but here it says login failed, wrong password, which is fine. I can also print that out. So let's print that. Same thing, wrong password. just like that. Let's restart the server and see. And we have an error, of course, because I can't have two return statements in the same method, or at least in the same block in the method. Okay, login failed, wrong password, and here it also says in the server logs, wrong password. Good. Now, what if we log in successfully with an existing user, super secret, exclamation mark, send request, trying to log in successful for user Daniel. Is there a typo somewhere? Because there's a J in front of that trying to log in string. J trying to, no idea. Probably I pasted that when my keyboard was in that console. Yeah. Okay, that user is logged in and we get an access token as a response value. Then user Daniel, password super secret. Okay. That's awesome, actually. That's that's incredibly nice, considering that just yesterday I've recorded my first video in Flask and all I could do was creating a simple visitor counter. But this is now really nice. I mean, this is almost a login system. We just have to do some simple additional things. So let's log in as William Nduka here. William Nduka. And the password is I like the weather today. I like the weather today. And let's send that request. And go to the browser again, and here, okay, this return code is okay. That means the login system works. We have password authentication based on our simple database here. Of course, yes, it's not nice to store the passwords clear text. We could build in some simple hashing just by using a simple library here in Python. But I think I want to focus on the login system itself today and the login logic. So that's sufficient for me. And maybe it's time now to generate a proper access token. So how do we generate a simple, stupid access token? Most people would now probably go to Google and search for Python authorization or authentication library, whatever. But an access token is pretty much just a random number. Just like a password is technically also just a random number. It's just a random number that is so big that it is very unlikely to find randomly. So Python, maybe let's generate a 256-bit key. We can return a token hex, and this looks very good. I mean, this is something that you cannot guess, and that could serve as our access token. So we use the secrets model. Very good. We use that, and then we use token hex. Okay, so let's go up, import secrets, and then let's do the following. Return token hex 16. What exactly is 16? It's probably the number of bytes. 16 bytes, and that is how many bits? 16 times 8 is 128, which is still completely sufficient for a simple web app. Okay, so we're basically generating a random number and returning it formatted as a hex string. There's nothing specific or there's no magic going on here. regarding how that string is formatted. You could format this as a simple integer number. It doesn't matter. Okay, so 16-byte number. Let's restart the server and see what happens if we log in successfully. Then we should get as a response code the token. Let's send a request, and there's an error, of course, because I messed up the syntax again with a semicolon, and I have to remember that I'm in Python. Now let's send the request again. What is wrong? Name token_hex is not defined. That is probably because I have to refer to it via the secrets module. Let's see if that happens. I'm just guessing it. I'm really just guessing, guys. Let's send the request, and that's okay. And there is our authentication token. So this is awesome. And this authentication token ensures that the user can stay logged in also when browsing other pages on the web app or when sending further requests. The user does not have to send the user credentials every time. The user can simply send this token. If we log in again, it will send a new token, of course, because we have not adapted the logic yet. Yeah, but each time, it's fine that each time we send a login request, we get a new token. That's fine. Okay, now that we have a token, we have to store that token and associate it with the user in the user database. This means we do check the login here, and we should probably not just generate the token here, but we should generate and store token. And that is a new method, def generate and store token, that accepts as input the username, such that the method knows which user to store it for. Maybe also the user DB, but that is optional technically because we can just reopen the file and update it when we add the token. Yeah, let's just keep it simple. We generate and store the token for the username. Okay, username. Then generate and store the token. That means secrets. What was it called? Generate hex or something? Token hex. Oh, my short-term memory is not at the height of its capabilities today. Token hex. That is the access token. And then we store the token in the user DB. And the user DB, how do we store it in the user DB? We just read the JSON. Since we're doing that already up here, let's just extract that logic and create a get user DB method that does the job for us. And here we are returning this. Awesome. And then we will also need a write user DB, which completely overrides the user DB. Technically, it would be much better to only override a specific section of the text file, but I'm not sure if that's even possible. And that is the biggest downside to, as compared to a regular database, of course. In a regular database such as SQL, you can edit individual rows And it does not matter whether it's the first row or the last row or a row in the middle. But when you use a text file as user database, pretty much whenever a user does anything, you update the entire file. If I'm not completely mistaken. I think operations at the end of the file are very, very simple, because you can just append data to the end of the file. And that's the operations that most modern database systems rely on. They use internally text files and use them as logs, which they append on and update data. But for small software with just a couple of users that you're prototyping, it's completely fine to have a file-based database. All right, so we write to the UserDB. How do we do that? Python JSON, we want to write the JSON to the file. And if I recall correctly, we had instructions here somewhere in this JSON W3 schools page. So we import JSON. And there's the dumps method. So we provide dumps, and we call the dumps method, provide the JSON, and then that will dump the entire JSON. So write UserDB, and we write updated content, updated JSON. And then we do JSON dumps, or let's call it JSON string, just to be aligned with the previous naming. And when we generate and store a token, we do the following. We get the UserDB. We get the UserDB just like that, very simple. And then we access the UserDB at the username. We already know the username exists. Let's just document it here. We know the username exists because this method is only ever called when we know the username exists, because this method is only ever called after a successful login. Okay, UserDB username, then we get, this will return the user object. And here we would like to add a new field. And this is a dictionary, I think, strictly speaking. Dictionary, how to add a new field. Add key, add a new key. I can just invent one. Okay. Username. Wait, this is the user properties. These are the user properties. Then user properties access token. If that works, I will scream. And then I will do access token. So user properties access token is going to be access token. And that's it. Return. This generated and stored the token, and we return the access token for it to be successfully returned here. Let's see. Okay. The server is running. Let's open, not our plan, but let's open the users JSON here. Let me close the plan again. So there's our UserDB. It currently has no access tokens because none of the users is logged in. Then let's send a request, and I will send a request for myself. I will log into the system now, and my password is super secret. And let's send the request. The login is successful. And that means we should have an access token now. I will refresh that page, that file, and nothing happened. This means that it did not work. Why? Of course, I have to, since I updated the user properties now, obviously I will have to rewrite the file. How could I forget that? So write userdb, and then I will write the userdb for userdb, just like that. Let's see if that works. I hope. Okay. Let's go over to the users here. Perform the login requests for user Daniel with password super secret. Send request. Login successful. Let's see. I will refresh the file now, and it doesn't work. Good God. Write userdb. Why doesn't it work? Probably if I modify the user properties, which I get from the userdb, then it doesn't do anything on the userdb itself. It will probably only update the user properties. So let me just also update userdb at username is equal to user properties, and then we write the userdb. Let's see. Let's log in with user Daniel and password super secret. Log in. Response is okay. We have an access token, and let's go to the JSON database and refresh. No. Why? What's wrong? JSON dumps JSON string. JSON dumps will convert that into a JSON object, apparently. But I want to write it to a file. Oh my God. So that's the same mistake I did earlier. Earlier I read the JSON in somehow from a file, but I did the same mistake. Instead of specifying the file name, I should have read the file first and then specified the JSON. Yeah. Okay, Python write to file. We will overwrite any existing content. We will not append to the end of the file. That's what I referred to earlier. Appending is extremely efficient, but if we append, then we have multiple duplicated entries and we will have to perform additional logic. Okay, so I have copied that code, write userdb. This will dump the JSON, the userdb userdb. Let's write a file. And I will write the file users.json. Sorry for the dirtiness here. I will write with the W property as file write. And what am I going to write? Okay, that's what I'm going to write. I'm going to write the userdb JSON. And the userdb JSON is going to be this userdb JSON. And what do we return here? We return nothing. This method does not need a response, I think. Let's try that. I will send the request now. Login is successful. We got an access token. Let's go over to the user's JSON file and read it. And it's not formatted, but there is the Daniel property, my username. There's my password. There's a creation time. There's the status. And there it is. This is the access token. As you can see right here, let me just highlight it for you. That is the access token. So our UserDB is now working, which is awesome because this means that this user is now authenticated. It has its own access token. So whenever a user from the front end or from anywhere, from any API call provides this access token, then the backend knows just by looking it up that this is now the user Daniel and is already authenticated. Awesome. Awesome. And with that, I think we have a fully working login system. Of course, we haven't yet implemented the expiration of the access token. We haven't implemented password hashing, etc. But this is how you do it. This is how you do it. We have created a simple login system based on username and password, which checks if a username and password are stored in a local, extremely simple database, which is awesome. We don't need the fancy database technology. It's just a JSON file. And then the server receives response codes, which are the access tokens, which can be used by the front end in the future to perform further requests. And now, because this is such a simple system, but it's still fully working, everybody in the comments will freak out. I already know it. You should have used this authentication framework, whatever. Yeah, but this is all the fun. You know, you always have to remember the basics. And back in time, like 20, 30 years ago, authentication didn't used to work much differently than that. It's just simple logic. And you just check if a user exists. If it exists, you return an access token that can be used for further requests. Extremely simple. I think we have learned a lot on about how authentication works in software. And this was extremely fun, also because this is something I have wanted to do a long time. And yeah, I'm so glad I recorded this video actually. Awesome. Really, really nice. I hope you liked this video where we created this super simple login system based on Python, Flask, a simple JSON database handling. If you enjoyed this, then please leave a like, subscribe, and write your comments, your opinions, and any suggestions for the future. We will keep software simple, and this is my mission. All right. Have a good time. Bye.